Okay, John, I think people are coming in now, so you'll be able to start whenever.
Great, thanks, Rachel. Yeah, I'm just watching the the numbers of attendees spike up as everybody gets logged in and attached to the system. So we'll just give it about 30 seconds. I like to start on time whenever possible, but it's wonderful to see so many people here already raring to go. Thank you, everybody, for joining us tonight. We'll get started here in just a minute. We have our super duper team of panelists ready to go. All right, I think we've slowed down in terms of how many people are joining us, so we'll get started here, and as other people come on board, they're welcome to join us as well. And of course, Rachel took over my computer screen, so now I have to switch to another screen, but that's okay. Well, welcome everybody, and thank you for joining us at our Kawartha Land Trust 2020 Town Hall. I say that as if this is something we do on a regular basis, but of course, as with so many other things this year, we're kind of reinventing a number of things at KLT. And so normally at this time of year, we'd be really excited to be seeing all of you face to face at our Thanksgiving event. But we couldn't do that this year. And so instead, we thought we'd try and have an opportunity to give you all a little bit of an update about what KLT has been doing in the last little while through COVID-19 and beyond, to officially launch our new strategic plan, which is pretty exciting. And then to just have a chance for kind of some questions and answers at the end. So before we get started, I'd just like to do a short land acknowledgement and acknowledge the fact that we at Kawartha Land Trust respectfully acknowledge that we work and are located on Treaty 20 Mississauga territory and in the traditional territory of the Mississauga and Chippewa Nations, collectively known as the Williams Treaties First Nations, which include Curve Lake, Hiawatha, Alderville, Scugog Island, Rama, Beausoleil, and Georgina Island First Nations. Kawartha Land Trust respectfully acknowledges that the Williams Treaties First Nations are the stewards and caretakers of these lands and waters in perpetuity, and that they continue to maintain this responsibility to ensure their health and integrity for generations to come. And we're very grateful to bring you this event from their territory today. So we have a little program laid out for tonight. We're going to do a brief overview of the strategic plan. We're going to invite our, oh wow, this is amazing. Rachel is on the ball. There, forgot there was a slide. Yes, Jane, you can get a copy of the land acknowledgement, absolutely. So we're going to do a brief overview of the new strategic plan from John Desbiens. We're going to invite our committee chairs to speak briefly and share with us how they've started to implement that plan. We'll have an update from me, I guess, that's me, on some of the work that we've been doing in 2020 and what we've got coming up on the horizon. We have some volunteer recognition to happen as well, and then we'll finish up with some questions and answers. As everybody is speaking tonight, if you do have a question that you'd like to ask, you can put it in the Q&A section down below, and that should let you both enter in a question and also vote for your favorite questions, and so they'll move higher up in the rankings, so we'll get to them quicker. We will answer all questions at the end of the evening rather than trying to do them while people are presenting. And of course, there's the chat function as well, and so if you need to send a message directly to one of us, especially if you have a technical difficulty, feel free to send a message there to Rachel and she'll try and help you out, or you can put your questions in the chat as well. So I think that's the review of the program and the logistics of Zoom. And as I said, if you have any issues, please do let Rachel know. I'd say us know, but I can't fix them for you. And so without further ado, I'd like to introduce and ask John Desbiens to come forward and introduce himself and say a few words, and then to give us an overview of the strategic plan that we've developed last year and this year with your help. And John, of course, is the chair of the board of directors and a well-known figure in the KLT community. Take it away, John.
Thanks very much, John, and welcome everyone. I'm really glad you could join us under these circumstances, but so it is. The strategic plan is something we're very excited about. It was developed just this past year, and we had initially planned to be launching it with much fanfare earlier this year, but unfortunately, circumstances as they were, and then we won't let it remain nameless, as they were, it put this off for until now, basically. And so we thought, even though we've been implementing on the strategic plan, it's really important that we have an opportunity to share it. So given that we're not face to face for the Thanksgiving event, we thought this would be a great way to share the strategic plan with you and help you understand what we're excited about doing over the next several years and what we hope to achieve. So we'll start the presentation. For those of you who may be new to the Kawartha Land Trust, we thought it's always important to just start, make sure we're all on the same page as far as what KLT is. We are non-governmental, and we are an organization that's registered as a charity. And we're fundamentally and wholly about conserving the natural environment, enhancing the quality of life in the Kawarthas. And I think for those of many of you, in fact, if not everyone, loves being out of doors and being out in nature, and certainly appreciates the benefits and what that does to your quality of life. So we recognize that, but also just for the intrinsic benefits that that a strong and healthy ecology brings to the world at large. So we accept donations from donors, very generous donors out there who have donated important lands, as well as interest in their land. So they may not necessarily be donating the land itself, but certainly recognizing the need for conservation. And we engage in community support to ensure that these lands are cared for into perpetuity. And that's a big thing with KLT, Kawartha Land Trust, is we really do believe that it is possible to care for these lands into perpetuity. And so that's a big part of how careful we are in selecting and bringing in the lands that we do, and ensuring that we're able to really be with these in the long run. We don't want people to think that this is a short-term venture. This really is for the long run. So since 2001, when KLT began, we've protected 18 properties, and that works out to over 4,100 acres, 4,150 acres of diverse land throughout the Kawarthas. And we also assist in the management of 5 additional properties. And so that totals up to 23 properties, which is wonderful, and we hope to add to that. So that's very exciting over the last while. I think our pace of land acquisition has been unprecedented, and so we'll speak to that a little bit in the future. So when we talk about the strategic plan itself and really what the vision is, we did revisit what our vision is, and it doesn't change in that we're protecting land, natural spaces, and all the connections that support healthy ecosystems. But where we really got cheeky was to say, well, we want it to be a 30% protection of the Kawartha region. And we know we can't do this alone, but we do envision a future where there is a 30% landmass of the Kawartha region that is protected, and I mean truly protected. So that fits in with our mission for caring for the lands entrusted to us and helping others to protect the land that they love as well. So whether we're doing it directly or indirectly, we can't do it alone, but we are there to support that mandate across. Our values really fall out of trust. Being Kawartha Land Trust, I think the focusing on that word trust is paramount, and it really runs as a theme throughout everything we do, whether it's for conservation and committing to making sure those conservation efforts are permanent, and people can trust that that's the case when they donate land and money towards our efforts. Collaboration. Those relationships also require trust, and we value those because, as I said before, we cannot do this alone. There are other organizations that have similar values and mandates, and so we try to work with them to protect these lands. So that 30% goal certainly requires some collaboration with some other organization. Trust only comes through transparency. And so we are very transparent in our plans for the lands that we manage, certainly with our finances, all of our stewardship, not only of the land that we have, but also the donations and volunteer contributions of our supporters. We are a trust, and we mean to keep that trust for generations. Integrity, of course, follows with that, not only committed to protecting and conserving, but also being accountable for the work that we do to all our volunteers, donors, and the community at large. And as well as innovation, we need to be open to change. We understand that circumstances change, that opportunities may present themselves, or challenges may present themselves. And as those circumstances do change and come forward, we need to adapt. And so we are open to recognizing when innovation is required. And so that's another important part of where our values sit. So why a new strategic plan? The last one was great. The one that we created in 2016 was fantastic. So why a new one? Well, circumstances do change, and to be frank, as one person put it, we couldn't imagine the growth that KLT would have experienced in the last few years. And, as a consequence, we met many of those goals that were set in 2016. So it was time that we really revisited the plan and looked, at where we now stand as a much more complex, certainly a stronger organization. Our competency is bigger than it's and more more depth than we've ever had, and so in that it required a revision of our strategies as we go forward. So, and the fundamental purpose of this is to focus our core functions, align our resources and structures, and guide our decision making. So this was also a great time to be engaging our volunteers and donors and supporters to get their views on what KLT is and what it should be doing. So that engagement process was quite extensive. We had online surveys, we had public consultation events throughout the cohorts, really getting out there to sit down and talk with people across the table. We had some key informant interviews where there were individuals that we knew had great expertise or experience, or certainly innovative insights that we knew would be very valuable to this process. Larger sessions with volunteers that we facilitated, and then we followed up as we consolidated a lot of the engagement information that we collected. There was really some interesting questions that we had to ask ourselves, so we had to then follow up with people to really understand what we thought they meant, or perhaps that they could expound further on some of their thoughts. So it was a great process, I think, for everyone involved. And where we landed with this process was with what we have as our 4 key strategic objectives. And as you see here, it's no surprise, it includes securing and protecting land, but it also talks about, the practice and promotion of sustainable land stewardship, and really working towards, sharpening our skills and making sure that we're doing an engagement and outreach that is enhanced and broader than we've ever done before. So whatever we're learning and we're doing, we need to be sharing that out in the community. And as we grow and do this, the more lands that we bring in to be protected, and the more community entities that we're working with that are like-minded, that requires growth. And we're certainly leaning heavily on our volunteers and on our donors to do that, but we need to do it sustainably. And so, we'll talk about each of these maybe just in a little bit more detail and some of the strategies so that we can reach some of these strategic objectives. But they do allow for flexibility, as circumstances change in the social and political environment. And we know that's key for, as I mentioned before, on the innovation side. So in the first strategic objective of securing and protecting land, we want to make sure that we refine our land acquisition process, identifying lands that are truly ecologically valuable, using the Kawartha naturally connected preferred scenario. There was a lot of great work that went into that by and from a diverse group of really bright minds that has identified throughout the Kawarthas, if we're going to focus our attention on securing and protecting lands, where that should be. And so that's been an invaluable tool as we've gone forward, not to mention some of the other techniques and sciences that we've used. As well, developing our land securement strategy and refining that, enhancing it to include both long-term and short-term to medium practices and priorities for securement. And it needs to be clearly communicated to stakeholders, partners, and the public. And that gets in the broader communication efforts that we've talked about. So a lot of these intertwine. Another big, because we have limited resources, it's critical that, as we look at our land securement policies and procedures, that it is an efficient process, and not just efficient for our own staff and volunteers, but so that it's a process that, a donor feels like they also, aren't burdened in a great way, or unreasonably in doing, this really grand gesture that whether it's through money or certainly through land. So we want to make sure that it is an efficient process. Certainly intensifying the outreach. If people don't know who we are and what we're trying to do, and sharing those values and finding value alignment, we really won't see nearly as many protection opportunities as we would hope. So it's critical that we continue to make sure that KLT is front of mind and what we're trying to do is front of mind. And establishing a land securement fund, and this falls in place for donors who want to exclusively donate to support our securement activities. Some people like to earmark the funds and the support that they give, and they want to know that it is going to really, whether it's buying land or whatever it takes to get that land and lock it down for protection into perpetuity. So we wanted to make sure that we can respond to those desires and those needs of people. And we find ourselves in an unprecedented time of change in the Kawarthas. I mean, with the 407 connecting with the 115, and it's only been exacerbated now with the the pandemic and many of the people living in large urban centers realizing I don't have to be in this large urban center and I don't want to be this close to this many people. And so our region is becoming more and more appealing to people, especially knowing that they don't have to go into the office necessarily. So we're seeing even more development pressure, and it's going to grow and grow and grow over the next few years. So it's critical that we get ourselves sorted and straight on this securement and protection of lands. Our second strategic objective, if you recall, was practice and promote sustainable land stewardship. And that means that we really ensure that we're maintaining rigorous standards for stewardship and across the board for all those involved, and communicating those, staying in regular touch with those that perhaps haven't donated their land but are working in conservation easements and the rest, so that the land is truly being protected. Similar to the fund for securement, we'd like to see an endowment fund. There are those that would like to see a stewardship endowment fund. And this is, again, critical for protecting lands into perpetuity. Empowering our volunteers, educated. We do have, and we were just talking before this began, the expertise that, being in this region, we're able to glean from the MNR as people retire. And it's fantastic and wonderful. And I don't know that other land trusts are nearly as rich in the skill sets that are here, but there's also a whole bunch of other people that are so in love with the land, but don't have the skills and really want to learn more about the land and how to protect the land and what can be done. So empowering volunteers in their capacity and competencies is critical. And the partnership models, again, is there. Knowing that we can't do it alone, and we need to work out ways to work with other organizations and entities that are just as interested as we are. And this one is close to my heart. I think you have to make sure that you have a robust policy around public access to the KLT managed lands. If people can't get out, see it, and be there and appreciate why this land is being protected, and also learn how to engage with the land and do it in a way that's not invasive and isn't destructive. I think that further reinforces their love for it, and hopefully their lifelong relationship with the Kawartha Land Trust and the land we're protecting. So we're committed to doing this for the long term, absolutely. The third was enhanced engagement and outreach. So communication strategies are critical, and we have developed further capacity within the organization to do this. Building and investing in new relationships. We're recognizing there is a broader conservation community out there, and even though we're all mutually aware of each other, it's time that we really started working together in a more coordinated way, and that includes with our First Nations as well. They, if anyone out there appreciates the value of natural spaces and land, it certainly is our First Nation partners and citizens. So dealing with the Williams Treaties First Nations is going to be critical to also protecting these lands as well. So they've been wonderful partners as we've gotten to know each other. Being a knowledge resource, as I mentioned earlier, empowering our volunteers and also empowering the public in general on delivering educational programs. And it's a great way to draw people in that perhaps haven't yet developed a relationship with the natural spaces and lands that are out there. So, and we've got to do a little bit of influencing on public policy. Maybe not overtly, but we have to make sure that that all levels of government, and especially on the municipal level, we're closest to those. Those are the ones that are really people that I think appreciate and recognize the value of what Kawartha Land Trust is doing, more so than perhaps the provincial and federal. But we need all levels of government to recognize that conservation and land protection is a big deal. And because once it's gone, it's gone. So. And the fourth was grow sustainably. And in so much as our human resources need to be supported, staff and volunteers. And what we really don't want to see is our volunteers and our staff burning out. We have to be realistic about the demands and asks that we make of them, and that we continue to support the training and expertise development that these people would have. We have to be also, as an organization, just knowing as KLT grows, that we have to stay on top of policies and procedures that help support and make sure that we're being robust in our approach to some of the standards and practices that as science and knowledge continues to emerge into new areas of understanding, that we follow in with that. And we're in a world of IT. If doing this as we are right now over a Zoom call doesn't reinforce the fact that IT can overcome some serious challenges, we've come to recognize just how powerful IT and information technology can be, really, through our GIS, not to mention communication, record keeping, data collection, throughout. So that's a really important way for us to grow sustainably and stay on top of what would otherwise be an impossible task. Financial sustainability as well, and that may mean diversifying revenue and being open to some non-traditional approaches to donation, legacy gifts, and the rest. So we've tried to be creative and open-minded about how we can ensure that it isn't just traditional dollar donations, that there are other ways that we might be able to move forward and keep the organization growing and viable. And optimizing the trustee model. There is a wealth of expertise and knowledge within our community and within our region, and it would be a real failing on our part not to take advantage of that resource and that knowledge base. So and as well as broadening the awareness of the organization and drawing more of that expertise in and wanting to join and help us. So that is the four main strategic objectives and some of the strategies that we plan to use. As far as implementation is concerned, as I mentioned, we've already been implementing the strategic plan, and the board of directors itself is committed to supporting the ED and the staff in the creation of the securement strategy, fund development plan, and an operational plan that we're going to monitor and measure the effectiveness of the operational plan, communicate progress to stakeholders on an annual basis. So it would be something like in the form of this, and completing an annual review of the strategic plan and amend it as needed. So it is a living document. It is something that as circumstances may change, case in point, that we are open to pivoting as required. So, and with that, I just want to thank you. Thank all of you out there for your support, and I think you just being here tonight shows your commitment and care for the lands that we all love. So thank you very much. And I'll hand it back to you, John, if I have that right as the moderator.
Sure, I'll take it over. Absolutely. Thank you so much, John, for that, for going over that with us. And as you say, it was quite a process to get there to the strategic plan at the end, and there were a lot of consultations, a lot of surveys, and thank you to everybody who participated in that process. It was great to be able to connect with you all. As John mentioned, we really can't do what we do without volunteers, and we're very lucky to have some extraordinarily intelligent and experienced volunteers who work with us, and many of them participate in some of our committees. And so we wanted to take a moment now, unless Tasman's telling me I've got the wrong agenda, which she isn't. I wanted to take a moment now to ask our committee chairs to kind of just share a little bit about what the committees are working on and how that contributes to the strategic plan. So Bill Crins, as the chair of the Securement Committee, would you like to start us off, please?
Okay, thanks, John. So I've put some thoughts together with regard to the strategic objectives and the strategies under that our committee is largely responsible for. Our committee deals with the actual selection and process and vetting of properties for securement and also for conservation easements. So over the last just under a year, I think we've been working on a land securement plan, which fits in nicely to objective number 1, strategy A, which is review and refine our land acquisition process, and also partly under B, develop our land securement strategy, including long-term and short-term targets. Just a little bit about how that, or what that contains. We've taken a slightly longer timeline. So we've developed the land securement plan to focus on a 5-year timeline. This was recently completed by the committee and was presented by John Kintair to the board at their September meeting. Part of the strategy is to accelerate land acquisition and protection. So in that vein, we've set a target of 600 hectares or 1,500 acres over the 5-year period. The Kawarthas naturally connected preferred scenario is still a central and primary source of information for prioritizing land within our landscape, along with some other analytical tools that we've used. And we've, in addition to using that approach, for the 5-year horizon, we've also identified 4 priority areas that would serve as a focus for landowner contact and subsequent securement within the KLT landscape. These have been named as the West Kawartha Wildlands, the Central Kawarthas, the East Kawartha Lakelands, and the Fleetwood Creek watershed. That's not to say that other areas within the KLT landscape would not be considered as far as, so John has a map of the 4 focal areas here, priority areas. You can see the, I don't know if you can see my cursor here or not, but the West Kawartha wildlands are up in the, oh, okay, there's another cursor. Yeah, that one. Then and you can see that each one of these focal areas already has some properties that have been protected by KLT. Those are the red properties that show up there. So you can see the Cation property in the West Kawarthas. You can see several properties in the Central Kawarthas, including Big Island, the Chase property, which is a management agreement, and Emily Creek. Those 3 really stick out. And then there's a couple of smaller ones in there as well. The East Kawartha Lakelands focuses on Stony and Clear for the most part, and a little bit of Lovesick and Buckhorn. And there are several protected properties in there, including the Dance property, Ingleton Wells, Cowan, and Darling. And then Fleetwood Creek is the southernmost one, and it's the one that's entirely off of the shield. The other 3 straddle the connection between the shield and the limestone. But Fleetwood Creek contains the McKim property and the Fell property. And so those are, we've identified those as priority areas. But as I said, that would not preclude considering significant lands elsewhere within the area. These will just help to focus staff attention on landowner contact and subsequent potential securement. We also tie into the idea of the vision of conserving 30% of the landscape through various mechanisms and with various partners. And so as John Desbiens mentioned, that would include First Nations, municipalities, conservation authorities, and other conservation agencies. For example, there is another land trust on the Oak Ridges Moraine down in the extreme southwestern portion of our area that overlaps a bit with us. And so there'd be a little bit of collaboration between the two trusts. And then we've even had some recent dealings with adjacent trusts in Hastings County in terms of properties that fall within the Kawarthas naturally connected zone, but are right on the edge of the county boundary. We constantly are reviewing our policies and procedures. That's tying into another one of the strategic objectives. And as needed, we will continue to do that and to revise or even develop new policies. It also ties into strategic objective 4, growing sustainably, in terms of making sure that our policies and procedures follow best practices and link with the overarching standards and procedures that the Canada Land Trust has established. Finally, with regard to the establishment of a land securement fund, we will be working with the development committee in the future to think about the kinds of funds that might be established for donors who wish to focus entirely on the securement component of our work, and also probably work on criteria through which those funds could be accessed. So those are the main objectives and strategies that our committee has been and will be working on in the near future.
Great,
Okay.
Thanks very much, Bill. Next up, I have Warren Dunlop as the chair of our Stewardship Committee. Take it away, Warren.
Thanks very much. Thanks very much, John. Yeah, as our committee has been reviewing the strategic plan and looking at how we can address the objectives, the strategic objectives in the plan. The Stewardship Committee is primarily leads the development and implementation of stewardship policies, the programs, information management for stewardship activities, and property stewardship plans, either directly developing or supporting the development by other volunteers. So each property, there's a commitment that each property will have a stewardship plan, which will direct the activities on that property to maintain and sustain the natural heritage values on that property into the future. The committee also assists in recruiting and training property stewardship teams and volunteers, other land management type volunteers. The committee provides technical advice to support the KLT staff in stewardship planning, both not only on an individual property basis, but across the organization, and as far as developing policies and procedures, as Bill has mentioned for the Securement Committee. We also review some of the background documents that are put together for properties in support of the Securement Committee that Bill leads. And we're reviewing those background documents, looking for any flags or any stewardship challenges there might be, and that might be taken into account when deciding whether a property should be secured. So not just looking at the value of the property, but also how that might impact the organization and what management needs there may be in future. And we also help the staff put together work plans for the coming year by reviewing those plans for stewardship activities on the various properties and making sure they align with the priorities that are outlined in the stewardship plans for those properties. So a bit of an oversight role for the committee. So some of the things we've been trying to do to address the strategic plan is one of the things, given the rather ambitious targets for acquiring new properties in the future, and frankly, the rapidity with which new properties have been secured in the last couple of years, a commitment to develop stewardship plans for those properties can become pretty onerous when you've got a limited pool of volunteers. So we've been reviewing the stewardship planning process and trying to come up with a streamlined process and a streamlined format for those stewardship plans, which should ensure that those plans are developed within a timely manner to provide direction for managing the various properties. So that's been a bit of an ongoing thing over the last few months that we've been working with Tom Unruh, the land management or land stewardship manager, to try and streamline that process. We've also been, there was some talk about from John Davian about endowment fund. I don't know whether people realize, but each property has an endowment fund associated with it to ensure that stewardship can go on in perpetuity, covering things like insurance and stewardship activities on the property and that sort of thing. In the past, there's generally been a standard percentage that's been identified. Some properties need more, and some properties need less. So we've been supporting primarily a staff-driven activity to develop a stewardship fund, endowment fund calculator in order to tailor the amount of money that's required to manage a property to the needs of that property. So the committee has been providing input to KLT staff on that activity, and hopefully that'll mean that the endowment funds for individual properties will be more aligned, or will be better aligned with the requirements that those properties will need for management into the future. John also mentioned the need for that there are a number of people who would like to volunteer their time to help manage properties, maybe don't have the skills. Our committee has committed to trying to help develop training materials for those stewards and property stewards and volunteers in general. So we haven't quite figured out what that'll entail yet. And as people have mentioned many times today, changing times mean we may be looking at different approaches to that. We're also, with the securement of more properties and the anticipated securement of additional properties in future, the current model of having a single property steward or a small stewardship team for an individual property may not be sustainable as far as trying to recruit volunteers. So we're looking at different models that have been used by other organizations like the Nature Conservancy of Canada to develop stewardship models where perhaps the management of a property we might partner with a First Nation, with a cottager or property group, or a local naturalist group. So we've been looking at existing agreements that other organizations have and seeing whether we can adapt those or adopt them directly for use by KLT. Bill mentioned the Fleetwood Creek corridor as one of the focus areas for land securement. There's a great deal of public land or private land stewardship activities going on there where the KLT has been supporting owners to steward their own lands, helping them providing information to the property owners and giving them some direction on how they might best manage their property to maintain those natural heritage values. And so our committee is supporting that activity and will continue to explore those kind of activities in future. And Bill did mention about their committee reviewing policies and procedures. Those of you who have ever been involved in that know that's a really fun thing to do. And so we're also doing that. We're looking at, there's a number of policies that the Stewardship Committee has developed over the years relating to, John mentioned, one of the strategic objectives is having a robust access policy. So that's a big high priority item for our group to look at, is to review what we have and see whether it's adequate for the future. There's a number of other policies regarding things like management of invasive species, management of species at risk, vegetation management policies that have been developed over the years. Some of them actually predate the previous strategic plan. So we'll be looking at those to either revise or consolidate or rescind as necessary to make sure our policies are up to date and in line with the strategic plan. So I think that's it for me. John, I'll hand it back to you. Thanks.
Great, thanks very much, Warren. And I kind of want to, like, aren't the committees doing anything? You guys kind of just like, you're so relaxed right now. You've got nothing on your plates at all. We really do appreciate it though, and I take your point, Warren, about policy review. It's everybody's favorite job, and we're always looking for more volunteers. So if you love it as much as Warren and I do, come on down and let us know. And finally, I'm going to ask Eva Kennedy, the chair of our development committee, to share what that committee's been working on.
Thanks, John. Our committee is composed of two passionate and hardworking staff, supported by some equally passionate volunteers. So collectively, there's experience in fundraising, community engagement, social media, marketing, communications, event coordination, ecological restoration, architecture, psychology, videography, and storytelling. So it's quite a mixed group. I'm just going to provide some examples of development activities underway under each of the strategic objectives. Not that necessarily it's our development committee that's been involved, but the awareness, the enhancing engagement and outreach in terms of strategic objective 3 is something I think that all the committees do. We're going to develop a communication strategy, but in the meantime, we're continuing our presence on traditional and social media, maintaining awareness of KLT through hiking opportunities, special events, all adhering to COVID protocols. And the communication strategy is in development. It's an involved process, very iterative. We're analyzing information related to the effectiveness of current activities, for example, hits on the website, newsletter activity, Facebook and other social media uptake. We're analyzing our own fundraising statistics and studying other land trust fundraising tactics. We've conducted focus group sessions to try and improve the effectiveness of our communications and outreach. We're in terms of investing in relationships with others, we're continuing our work with existing Kawarthas naturally connected partners, which includes CA, conservation authorities, municipal governments, environmental non-government organizations, Peterborough Field Naturalists. And we are continuing and building on our First Nation engagement activities. Some examples of outputs would be the second annual medicine walk on Cation in September, the Manoomin harvest demonstration, the Christie Bentham wetland Indigenous medicine walk. A lot of the Christie Bentham has been quite publicly shared right now, the fundraising going on there. We want to be a knowledge resource from the community. So we want to share knowledge, first of all, about the need to protect natural heritage for its intrinsic value and providing the ecological goods and services. So we're having guided naturalist walks to deepen our understanding of our connection to nature, the Bird Day webinar, the Legacy of Conservation Zoom meeting, Informed Fridays, which we're highlighting work throughout the summer, all great opportunities for people to learn more about our natural heritage. And then secondly, about the direct physical and psychological benefits of being out in nature through either forest bathing, mindfulness walks, or just aimless walks on our trails. Another part of being a knowledge resource is the new partnerships, the Compass Early Center and Care Program, where in the summer, children were introduced to nature, which develops our future champions and protectors of nature. In terms of influencing public policy development, we haven't begun new work on that. We still have good partnerships with the conservation authorities and connections with the city of Kawartha Lakes and Peterborough County through the Kawarthas Naturally Connected, but no new work has actively begun yet. And then the final strategic objective in terms of growing sustainably, we want to explore ways of diversifying revenue. So things that we've done is we've checked in with all our donors by phone during this COVID time and thanked them for their support. We've also benefited from significant bequests of land and funding. So we want to make sure we're communicating the bequest legacy opportunities. There had been a plan to reach out to state lawyers and financial planners, but during this time of not really meeting, we're looking for other opportunities to enhance outreach there. We gratefully accept donations of time, land, and money, but to increase the money component, we're also exploring grant opportunities for more family foundations, as many government grants are being redirected right now. So we always seek ideas for new revenue streams. That's about it. Thank you.
Thank you, Eva. I've heard so many people say that, COVID-19 has been a great opportunity to slow down and relax and really, just take it easy and enjoy life as it passes you by. And as you can see, our volunteers have decided to give us that time instead, and we do really appreciate it. I'm going to jump into, I guess, just a quick kind of presentation about what KLT has been up to this year, what we've accomplished so far, and what's to come. And Bill and Eva and oh my gosh, I've forgotten your name now. Give me a break. Sorry, guys, it's late at night. My kids just came in. Warren, my apologies, Warren. I knew it would come to me. They've stolen some of my thunder, but that's just great. I'm very glad that they have, because it truly has been a team effort, and I don't need to tell you all about absolutely everything that's happened. So John did share our strategic objectives, and I think I just want to say, we know that Kawartha Land Trust is poised for growth, and we know that in order to sustain that growth, our systems and processes and people are going to need to grow as well. And so part of the strategic plan, we kind of identified what was needed, and 2020 was meant to be a year of foundational investment and just some slow, moderate growth, so that we'd have lots of time to kind of develop our foundation before we exploded out into the future again. And so our operational plan prioritized several of the strategies for implementation in 2020 and to set the stage for some more growth in 2021 and beyond. And there's some sort of saying about the best laid plans of mice and other people. And well, COVID happened, as it did to all of us. And, that threw a lot of our plans off, as you've heard some of tonight, but it's also provided a lot of opportunities. And so truly thanks to the dedicated work of staff and volunteers, and to the support of our monthly donors and the strong base of multi-year funding agreements that we have in place, we've been able to keep our doors open. We've been able to keep our properties open and accessible to the public. We've been able to make some progress on the operational plan as we had imagined, and also achieve some other amazing things along the way. Just to give a really brief kind of picture of what 30% looks like, and that's something new in the strategic plan this year. You can see on the table there that 30% of the land in the Kawarthas is about 475,000 acres. And as John pointed out, Kawartha Land Trust isn't going to do that all by ourselves. Much as I would like to say, yeah, we can do that. We're going to need partners in partnership, and we're well aware of that. We've looked at how much land is in conservation right now or protection, and there's a ways to go. We're still needing about 250,000 acres to be protected in order to reach that 30% mark. And so KLT has a role to play, as do other organizations. And really, with COVID-19, and John mentioned the development pressures, and we've really seen two things, I think, with COVID-19. One is the power and importance of nature in people's lives and access to nature. And we've seen that in a number of ways as a way to keep people healthy and keep people sane, and also just the high demand for natural experiences. And we've also seen an increase in real estate and development pressures now that people realize that they don't just have to commute out here for cottage life, they can actually live and work out in cottage country. And we've seen quite a lot of pressure from that regard. So Bill did a wonderful job of sharing about the land securement plan that's been developed, and so I won't spend any more time really talking about that item, except to say really thank Bill for his work. He took the lead on that and brought us all along with him in developing that document. And it is a beautiful, wonderful, fantastic policy document. And our next task is going to be to turn it into a tool or a public-facing document that other people other than just ourselves will want to read. But anybody who would like to see it, you're more than welcome to get in touch, and I'm happy to share a copy of it, but we'll also make a publicly accessible version available soon. So one of the parts of the first strategic priority was to accelerate land acquisition, and Bill talked about some accelerated targets. And as I said, in 2020, we were going to kind of take it slow and just work on the foundations, and well, that didn't quite happen. So we already earlier this year secured the 300-acre Kepler property, and that happened just before the pandemic started and the lockdown started. So we still haven't had a chance to properly celebrate that property, but it is an absolutely beautiful one up in the northeast of our service area. Later on this year, we're also expecting to secure 103-acre Van Nostrand property, which is a beautiful wetland property at the mouth of the Indian River. Those two are both interesting because they've both been completed within less than a year from the initial contact with the landowner, and that's something we've been working really hard towards, is to be able to get land accepted more quickly. Warren spoke about that, and Bill spoke about that, and I really have to thank them, all of the committee members, all of our naturalist volunteers who are willing to go out in all sorts of weather to kind of inventory these properties for us, and also a huge thank you to Tom and Anna as well for their work in making this happen. The other kind of exciting thing about the Van Nostrand property is that it's a beautiful opportunity to partner with the Williams Treaty First Nations for co-management of that property. It's a wish of the donor, and it's just a great opportunity given the proximity to the First Nations community. So we're really excited to kind of go down that road and pursue that a little bit more. We're also expecting by the end of the year to secure the 133-acre Morton property, which is just outside of our service area, but still within the Kawarthas Naturally Connected. And again, there'll be some opportunity for partnership with fellow land trusts in that. And this is breaking news that even the board, I don't think, knows about at this point, but we've also been approached by Mike Wilson, who's asked whether he can donate one of the parcels that he retained on Big Island, the southern parcel, by the end of the year. And so we're working with him to have that property donated to KLT and brought within the boundary of that Big Island project. And then, of course, there's the 32-acre McWilliams property, which we're also planning to secure by the end of this year. And that property has come to us through John McWilliams, one of our board members and trustees, as part of the larger Christie Bentham wetland project, with which Eva mentioned. And so for those of you who haven't had a chance to see this yet, this is a really exciting community empowered project that's really come to us from the community. We were approached by a local group of people who said, we'd really like to protect this property, but we need to raise the funds to do it. It won't be donated, we need to buy it. And so we said, sure, we'll try, we'll work with you to see if we can do it. And so this 136-acre property, the project has now expanded to 170 acres with the addition of the McWilliams property. And as you can see from the map, it forms kind of a key part in what could be the beginnings of a corridor of connected properties in the area. And so with these two properties, we're really kind of building this vision of a larger connected natural corridor and trail network along the shore of the lake there. And we're also developing partnerships with Orca to include the Heber Rogers Conservation Area within the management of this property to expand its influence out there. So there is a huge fundraising campaign on right now to raise the funds required to purchase this property. And I really have to give thanks to the local fundraising community on the ground who have been doing so much of the heavy lifting in this regard. And we've had amazing success. We actually broke $700,000 pledged towards the project today, which is a pretty great step along the way to our first milestone of having the $750,000 raised in order to be able to purchase the property by November 20th. And one of the really interesting things that we're seeing is that a number of the people contributing to this project are first-time donors to KLT. They've never donated to us before, and they're donating $5, $10, $50, $100,000 towards this project because they believe in the project, they believe in the organization, and they've been looking for this reason to help, this cause to latch on to. So this is really serving to also increase our profile in a high, a key priority area for both securement and development in our future. So the second strategic priority around practicing and promoting sustainable land stewardship, and again, a huge thank you to the Stewardship Committee, to Warren, to Tom and Patricia on staff for their work here. It's been a tough year for stewardship. It certainly started as a tough year. We got kind of advice early on in the pandemic from Nature Conservancy of Canada that our properties were in fact workplaces. And as a result, when there was a full lockdown on, we were not allowed to go to our properties except for emergency purposes. And that was really hard to stomach. It was really hard to accept, and it was also really hard to manage, to figure out, well, what can we do and what can't we do? Happily, things have opened up a little bit, and we found some really great, COVID safety protocols, which have enabled some small groups of volunteers to go out to properties and perform the necessary monitoring, the trail maintenance, and identifying and reacting to threats that need immediate action out on our properties. And as well, we've been able to have our fantastic naturalists go out and identify species that require special management attention, and help us to inventory properties that are under consideration for securement. We've also managed to monitor all but one of our CEAs, conservation easement agreements at this point, and that's been especially difficult again, because a large part of monitoring those is to kind of continue and build the relationships with the landowners, and a number of landowners have been very reluctant to meet with us. And so Tom's been working very hard to kind of get in touch with everybody and make sure that those relationships continue. And as Warren mentioned, we're working on some volunteer training programs. I think Eva mentioned it as well. And we've got some neat opportunities with the Christie Bend, the Wetland Project, and the Van Nostrand property to look at some, unique partnership models in terms of how we do stewardship. The second point in terms of stewardship is around the Stewardship Endowment Fund, and we do have a Stewardship Endowment Fund at Kawartha Land Trust. There are a few funds within it that are dedicated to specific properties, like the Big Island Fund, and then there's the General Stewardship Endowment Fund, and the income and revenue from that fund is meant to fund things like the property taxes that we have to pay, the insurance costs, the cost of doing monitoring, and the stewardship needs of any particular property at a given point in time. And the rule, the general rule has been, well, it's 20% of the fair market value. And as Warren mentioned, sometimes that's too high and sometimes that's too low. And occasionally it's exactly right. And so we're looking at moving to a calculator model to help us get a better picture of, for each individual property, what its needs are, and be able to kind of answer the question of, well, why? Why do you need that amount of money to be added to the Stewardship Endowment Fund before you can accept the gift of this land? And what that's going to allow us to do is to approach landowners with more confidence, and also approach the community to ask them to help support the costs of caring for the properties in perpetuity. So this is a tool that's under development. And again, if anybody is a spreadsheet guru and loves to play with numbers and would like to get involved, please let me know. I'm happy for the help. Stewardship is sometimes also about mitigating threats, and so I wanted to make sure that our community and our stakeholders were aware of this threat if you're not already. The Jeffrey Cowan Forest Preserve is 135 beautiful acres of ecologically important land on Stony Lake. It's part of the Stony Lake Trails Network, and it was donated to us by Norman Cowan for the purposes of safeguarding the ecological integrity and the passive recreation opportunity of the land for future generations. And Kawartha Land Trust is currently defending a filed statement of claim for the Jeffrey Cowan Forest Preserve, which centers around the desire of some of our neighbors to be able to drive across our property to reach their water access only properties. And our position is that this is, it violates the intent of Norman Cowan, the donor, and it violates our trust of keeping that donation in trust. And it also harms the ecological value of the land. And so it's not something that we can permit. And once again, and since I'm giving thanks, I need to give thanks to John McWilliams, Blair McKenzie, and Randy Northey, who have been on my ad hoc, non-lawyer legal advisory team to help me understand how to talk to the lawyers who are working with us on this case. So thank you very much to those folks. Eva did a wonderful job talking about the work of the development committee and enhancing engagement and outreach. And I just wanted to say, around this notion of the communication strategy and the marketing plan and all of the market research that we've been doing, thank you all for your patience as we ask you to fill out yet another survey and yet another survey and yet another survey and participate in yet another focus group and yet another information session. They are all different, they are all valuable, and they are all helping to inform us as we consider not only how to communicate better with our current constituents, but also how to attract more people to the cause of KLT. We know that there are people out there who love and value the work that Kawartha Land Trust do, or at least they would if they knew we were doing it. And so we need to find ways to reach out to them and bring them in. And of course, thank you to the development committee and to Tasman, our development manager, and to Rachel and Patricia for all of their hard work in making that happen too. And then finally, we have the Grow Sustainably strategic directive, and so we've been investing in a better HR management systems and also in kind of some health and well-being, both training and benefits for staff and volunteers to try and help us all live a more healthy and balanced life as we do all this work, wonderful work for KLT and for conservation in the Kawarthas. As many people have mentioned, there's always ongoing policy review, and that Canadian Land Trust Alliance's Standards and Practices document is one that we use as a guidepost. And I wanted to just talk about the super exciting, for those of you who think policy isn't exciting enough, there's also IT. And IT gets a bad rap because, well, it's just technology, it's easy. But I have to say, And here we truly have to give a real shout out to Anna, the unsung hero of our IT management and upgrades. We know that in order to grow and in order to be able to do more of what we want to do, we need to have the tools in place to make that easy. And so Anna has been working, it feels like around the clock, I'm sure, on everything from servers to remote access to cybersecurity to CMSs to all sorts of acronyms that I don't even know what they are. And I just imagine her sometimes, late at night, surrounded by all these wires, trying to make it all connect as she stays to have volunteers come and help. And so once again, if that sounds like a fun thing to you, to play with IT and figure out the best possible configuration of a wonderful system, please get in touch. I'm sure Anna would love to hear from you. And so finally, what does the future hold? What is the future of the Kawarthas? We know that Kawartha Land Trust will continue to steward our protected properties and will continue to secure additional land in the Kawarthas. We know that we're going to be intensifying landowner outreach and community conservation participation in the next few years through both local information sessions for landowners, targeted outreach to them, and the creation of some community conservation councils, local groups who can help us to identify opportunities within their communities. We know that we want to further develop our capacity to provide advice and assistance to landowners in key areas like we're doing in Fleetwood Creek that will allow us to enhance ecological integrity even in times when we can't necessarily protect the land outright. And we know that we want to deepen our relationship with key partners such as the William Treaties First Nations, Trent University and Fleming College, the conservation authorities, the field naturalists and other partners so that we can increase all of our collective impact on the landscape. And we also want to further explore and develop a program that will let us develop a connected trail network and natural corridors. And we're looking at that in the Burley Falls to Young Points area and beyond at this point. So stay tuned for that, as that's going to be a really exciting project to take up in the next year and two. In terms of what's the future for you, how can you help? Well, please keep staying informed and engaged with KLT, and please keep sharing your ideas and your knowledge and your passion with us. Please keep supporting conservation in the Kawarthas with your gifts of time and land and money. We can't do this without our volunteers. We can't do this without our donors. And we need all of you to be able to continue advancing the vision of a future where 30% of our region is kept natural. And speaking of volunteers, I'm going to stop sharing now and stop talking and turn things over to Patricia, who has been an amazing job this year of coordinating and corralling and recognizing and cataloging and all sorts of other things with our volunteers.
Awesome. Sorry, give me 1 second here. I'm just pulling up my screen. And awesome. Okay. So I'll try to keep it brief because I know that we're running a little bit behind schedule, but I just want to say hello, everyone. It's great to see, well, virtually see some of you, and it's great to virtually be here with you all and see so many people in attendance. For my presentation, I kind of want to shift the focus again back to you, our awesome volunteers who are the heart and soul of KLT and are instrumental to us doing the work that we do. So some 2020 highlights. So this year, we've all acknowledged it's been pretty tough, but despite COVID-19, we were able to accomplish a lot. At the beginning of the pandemic, we made the decision to keep our trails open. So a big thank you to all of our lead stewards and our boots on the ground volunteers for getting out and working hard to maintain those trails and keeping up with our property maintenance. Special shout out to our Boyd Island volunteers who helped to put in the docks this year and take them out. We actually received a numerous amount of thank yous from the people in the public and out in the community who were thrilled that the docks were there for them to use to access the island. So thank you. We've also noticed an increase of people getting outside and enjoying our trails, and many people have reached out and gave positive feedback and appreciation to KLT for us keeping our trails open. So they were able to access nature during these trying times, and they were really thankful for that. We also have a great crew of volunteers who have been consistently getting out and doing monitoring for us. And David Marshall this year actually piloted a new workshop concept that centers around mindfulness and awareness. And he used one of these workshops to train some of our volunteers, and it was a big success. We also got new promotional videos created for Fleetwood Creek and for the Christie Bentham wetland, in addition to a bunch of other videos and footage. So thanks to Sandra and Bob for putting those together and working so hard. It's been amazing to have those captivating promotional materials. And in addition to that, we also managed to host a couple of great virtual events like Eva mentioned. We had the virtual bird day and the legacy of conservation in the Kawarthas. So thank you to our speakers who volunteered your time for coming out and making those events awesome. Both events saw over 80 people in attendance. So that was pretty huge. And a lot of them were people who didn't know about KLT before. So that was great. So oftentimes there are a ton of work that gets done by our amazing volunteers that people are unaware of because it doesn't take place in the field, but rather behind the scenes. We're gathered here today to talk about the new strategic plan, of which we would not have without the hard work and dedication of our board members who work tirelessly with consultants to get the strategic plan together, put in hundreds of hours collectively, went into the development and overseeing of this new strategic plan. So thank you to all of our board members for the time that you put into that plan and in general for your support in driving our organization. One of the most important things for the success and respect of a charitable organization is that it is founded on good governance. And we certainly have that with the members of our board and trustees and our governance committees. Our governance committees made up of the Finance and Audit Committee, the Investment Committee, and our governance and nominating committees all work together to ensure that KLT is operating in a fiscally responsible way. And during these unprecedented times, especially, we are so grateful to have such an incredible team of expertise to help advise us through these difficult times. As mentioned earlier, our stewardship and securement and development committees have all been very active still during all of this time. So thank you guys for all of your work in helping to streamline processes, make property securement easier, and working on the newest fundraising campaign. Thank you so much for all of your hard work. So this year, we have some new faces that have joined our KLT team. We have still been engaging with some new people and getting them out on our properties when possible. Mostly, especially in the beginning, most of our volunteers were out doing property monitoring with their families. So we've got a lot of awesome photos here of people doing some monitoring on our different KLT properties. And in addition, some new boots on the ground support. We have welcomed some new faces on the governance and committee level. So we welcome Randy Northey, who is one of our newest board and trustee member, and Erin McCauley, who joins our stewardship committee. So KLT is a means to the future. This year, during these unprecedented times, the work that the Kawartha Land Trust does is more important than it ever was before. We've had an increase of people accessing our properties to escape and connect with our natural environment. I actually received a lot of overwhelming amount of calls in the beginning of COVID, ranging from people asking if our properties were open to a large amount of people actually thanking us for keeping our trails open so that they can get outside and escape. So we have a couple of testimonials here, one from Karima, who was super, super excited to learn about Boyd Island, and her son and her sister and their family got to go out for a paddle to Boyd, and they were super thankful that they were able to access it. They came all the way up from Ajax to do so. And in addition to that, we also received a great response to one of the questions that we often ask our volunteers on our intake forms when they come into our organization. And that question is, why do you want to volunteer with Kawartha Land Trust? So Maddie, who's one of our newest volunteers, she's 16, and this is what she said. I love the outdoors and I do a lot of reading out on what is to come for them. Most of it is pretty bleak and can depress me when I think of it too much. I'm working on an essay for a submission into a humanist contest right now, and the research I'm doing is overwhelmingly negative. I wanted to translate my angst over the future into something worthwhile, and I see signs for the Kawartha Land Trust all the time on my way to my cottage. I've been looking into it and some of its initiatives recently, and thought I was, although I was intimidated by all the expertise involved, I thought I'd see if I could help out. Despite me being young and inexperienced, I've spent a lot of time outdoors, and as a result, have a high degree of comfort with the outdoors. I am also pretty knowledgeable about the environment for someone my age, and the program I'm starting up in a few weeks at Trent University in the Youth Leadership in Sustainability program, and this will help definitely further my knowledge. I appreciate you guys taking the time, and I hope that I can be of service. The work that you guys do as volunteers is so inspiring. Not only does your hard work translate to more land in the Kawarthas being protected, but it also means that more people will have the opportunity to access and explore these beautiful natural areas, find their new favorite spots, and escape during these challenging times. We may not have gotten the opportunity to do as much as we would have in previous years or had the chance to gather together this year, but the important work is still being done, and we are all still coming together as a community, and we are inspiring others to get involved and be part of the conservation movement. So thank you guys all for your hard work. Thank you to all of our committee members, our board members and trustees, and all of our volunteers. You guys are awesome.
Fantastic. Thank you, Patricia. And I'm sure many of you would already know Patricia and have had a chance to see her infectious enthusiasm in all the best ways, infectious in a good way, enthusiasm for conservation and for the work that KLT does. And I just wanted to share that Patricia was actually awarded from the OLTA, the Ontario Land Trust Alliance. She was awarded the Emerging Youth Leader Award this year at the OLTA conference, and we're so pleased to have Patricia accomplish that and to have her on our team. So congratulations, big hands claps, and everything else. Thank you so much, Patricia. I think that brings us to the end of our kind of scheduled presentations, and so I might just turn it over to John Desbiens here to guide us through the questions and answers. You can put your questions in through the chat or preferably through the Q&A section, and we'll do our best to answer any questions you have.
Thanks, John, and thanks to everyone who presented. That was very informative, and I always learn something new when I hear people talk about KLT. So thank you. So the questions that we have questions coming in, and I would encourage people to continue to add the questions in through the Q&A. And so what I'll do is I'll read some of these off, and in some cases I'll try and blend some together so that we don't repeat. So if you don't hear me read your question verbatim, it may be because there's a couple that are very similar in nature. So there's a question here. When a donor, in addition to property, conveys money for ongoing support of that property, do you maintain that money in a separate account so it can be verified that the money is being used in accordance with the wishes of the donor? And John, I think you spoke to that earlier about in many cases where there is the money is allocated and is actually apportioned on record in that way, so that the money is dedicated solely for the use, that almost an endowment fund dedicated solely for the use of the land. Did you want to expand on that at all, or
yeah,
clarify
thanks.
that?
Yeah, so I think that there are a few cases in which the Stewardship Endowment Fund is specifically restricted for the use of only a single property, and that's certainly an option when it's either a need for that property. As in the case of Big Island, we knew that property was going to need a lot of attention over time, and we knew we needed a dedicated fund just for Big Island. Or in a case where a donor leaves money that is earmarked specifically only to be used for that property, at which point we'll do that as well. Most times when we're working with donors of land and they're able to make a contribution to the Stewardship Fund, we ask them to contribute that to the Stewardship Fund, which will be co-managed with all of the other funds that have come in. And the reason for that is that as programs and tax incentive programs change, as opportunities for restoration change, the needs for stewardship of any particular property in a given year may be higher or lower. And so to the extent that we can have those funds co-mingled and co-managed and use the revenue from that stewardship, from that endowment in order to meet all of the stewardship needs of the organization, that's certainly the preference. But we're definitely willing to work with donors when they want to see that their financial contribution is more targeted. We're happy to work with them on that as well.
And certainly knowing that even the division between stewardship endowment and securement endowment, in so much as you know that if it goes to stewardship, you know that money is being used to generate revenue to steward those properties, whether it's various needs over various years at whichever one it happens to be. Another question here, and it's more, I think, of a wonderful suggestion, is I'm hoping under non-traditional donations, you will be looking at a way that we can donate in memory of a loved one, like a tree planting memorial program that other conservation groups have. Thank you. So I don't know if anyone is familiar with other conservation entities out there and programs like that, and wanted to speak to that.
I'm just checking with the rest of the staff to see if any of them want to jump in, but if not, if you guys want me to be quiet and let me know, wave your hands or something, and I'll be quiet and let you guys answer. That's a great it's a great suggestion and question, Janet. Thank you. And we are definitely looking into that. We actually at the dance property, which came fully under KLT management last year, we're investigating the opportunity to plant a memorial forest there and give people the opportunity, exactly as you say, to donate in memory of a loved one and do a tree planting or contribute to a planting in an area of a forest. At the moment, you're certainly welcome to donate in memory of a loved one or in honor of a loved one, and we'll recognize those donations as such, both in our annual report and online and other opportunities. But this notion of kind of connecting it to a stewardship activity, a planting of some sort, is something that we're working on doing. Hoping to be able to launch sometime next year, but stay tuned, and we'll certainly make that work for you.
Great. We have another question here that asks, have we looked at what municipal governments are doing outside of this area in terms of conservation? And I guess I would say that certainly within the region, we have engaged and been engaged with municipalities. Municipalities will be the first to tell you just how little money they have. They really do struggle year to year, on and on, by not receiving, I guess, it's never enough money to do what they want to do for core servicing. But that said, many of the municipalities, certainly in our region, recognize even the socioeconomic value of these protected and natural spaces, and what it really does for even things like tourism and quality of life, and attracting professionals and the necessary tax base in order to provide the services that they like. But as far as, I guess, what the question here is probably directly on conservation, whether it's partnerships or whether it's direct activity, how much experience or how much exposure have our staff had, or is anyone can speak to that, or anyone else on the panel can speak to their experiences with other municipalities and opportunities that we see that we might mimic or adapt?
Bill, do you want to, excuse me, Bill, do you want to say anything about kind of some of the things we found in the research we were doing around the securement plan and the way that other municipalities can fund land securement? Or do you want me to talk about that?
You can talk about the funding side. I was just going to mention that, a lot of municipalities in the past have established initially environmentally sensitive area systems, and then more recently natural heritage systems, connected systems, which although not fully protected, they have some level of policy protection. And then they also serve to help focus securement activities. There's a lot of variation among municipalities in that regard, in terms of how they deal with their natural heritage systems and so on. So we have one, which is Kawartha's Naturally Connected, and with some recent enhancements in terms of connectivity, which we want to focus on as well. Financially, I'll leave that one to you.
Thanks, Bill. Yeah, and that connection to the natural heritage system is a really great one. When that Kawartha's Naturally Connected Natural Heritage System project was done, it had partnership with the municipalities, and still the City of Kawartha Lakes and Peterborough County are planning to adapt that mapping as their natural heritage system in their next official plan, provided they get approval from the government of Ontario, and that will give us all sorts of options in terms of zoning and property taxes and severances and various other things to make the work of conservation a lot easier. There are also municipal governments out there, as Bill says, every municipality has a different approach. There are municipal governments out there that actually do fund conservation and land acquisition for land through land trusts, and that's the cash in lieu of parkland dedications, and that's when they've kind of set a target to realize, well, hang on, we've got to, we need to preserve some land somewhere. To date, none of the local municipalities have taken that up, and I think in large part that's because we do have such a natural space still, but we're certainly always happy to partner with our municipal governments, and we have good relationships with them as well, certainly at the staff level.
Thanks, John. Yeah, certainly the official plans are a great way to guide development, where it should happen, shouldn't happen, the form of development and the rest. And we really are encouraged by the fact that the county was a partner on, at least within our region, our county was a partner on the KNC, and still is committed to using that. And as long as the province is okay with it, and it's detailed studies, so they'd be crazy not to. Otherwise, it's you're cutting with an axe versus a scalpel to understand the land. Another question, I guess, would be on outreach. Have you reached out to student groups? And I think it's implied in some of the discussions that have been here tonight that certainly we are. But are there any specifics that perhaps stewardship or development would like to talk about? Some recent successes, or Patricia, with regard to some of the student groups?
Yeah, so we work with students in a lot of different ways. This year was kind of weird. We couldn't really get people out, but last year we did work with the Ramblers from, I think it's Kenner High School, and they came out, and then we had a bunch of different, like we worked with Tracks Camp, and they were going to come out again this year with their kids to kind of do some work with us, but they didn't get a chance to. But we work with Fleming College quite a bit. They do a lot of work on Ralph's property in particular at Ballyduff, but they also, for the last 2 years now, have been completing conceptual restoration plans for us for different properties. So right now I have 2 groups of students, or I think it's 3 groups of students, sorry, working on conceptual restoration plans for the Dance Nature Sanctuary and for the Ballyduff Trails. So this gives them experience kind of taking inventory and figuring out restoration plans or just suggestions for habitat enhancements through the ecosystem management program at Fleming. And we also have worked with, we're working with a lot of students this year, actually, a lot of students getting their high school hours and things like that, which has been really fun to work with them and doing stuff. And we also do work with Trent as well. We have had a lot of students from Trent come to us, and we also have interns this year. And over the last couple of years, we've had several Trent and Fleming interns. So we do work a lot with our college and universities here and some of the local schools as well. And we're trying to reach out and do more.
Wonderful. I know there was a program within the primary schools with respect to recycling. And so, there was a lot of promotion of recycling and waste diversion, composting with the young kids. And they ended up taking that home to the parents and educating the parents in a lot of the ways that things could be done. So it's kind of a backdoor way into a lot of households to bring it to the fore. So
totally.
I guess I'm just circling back on the idea of the tree planting as a memorial, and there's a suggestion here that benches in memory of loved ones is another great way, just to really give people a chance to sit as they are, take a moment as they go along the trail or wherever they have to be enjoying the property and enjoy the view, and I guess smell the roses if there happen to be any there. But and I believe there are some of those already now, or am I mixing that up with some other trails I've been on, in the region? But
yeah, we don't, I mean, we do have benches at some of our properties, but they're not memorial benches at this time. But there are some other trails in Lakefield that do that. And so, I mean, it sounds like we have the beginnings of a working group to come in on board with the development committee and help us to develop this idea of the memorial tree planting, which is, I mean, near and dear to my heart. And I think it's a great program to take forward. So I saw the names of the people who asked the questions, and we've got your contact details. So we'll track you down.
Yeah, I'll just mention that certainly along the Rotary Greenway Trail and the Lang Hastings Trail, there are memorial benches, and they're actually quite nice benches. So there might be a model there with. I don't know if we want anything quite as solid and elaborate as those, but I'm sure a model can be developed.
Yeah, those have a 50-year, 100-year lifespan on them, I would think, the way those are built to last. Well, in fact, I think this picture is taken from a bench that I sat on up in the Halliburton Highlands last weekend. So, I mean, they're always in a great spot. So it's
And
Thanks,
sorry,
Al.
I jump in. Thank you to Al Sipple, who is my conscience in so many ways, who's reminded me that there is in fact one memorial bench at the Ingleton Wells property, I think on the Brown Trail. Yeah, Evan Thomas has just corrected me too. So I'm sorry, we do have one in existence, and we are actually talking about another one at that site. But in terms of a broader program, it's something we're looking at and kind of focusing on the dance property is a really good opportunity to do that.
Mhm. And there was a question here just on whether or not this recording will be available to the public for access. I think through transparency and all the rest, of course it will. The question is only then, is Anna, our IT expert, going to be able to pull that one off? So I think the will is there, whether or not the way and the ability, but I won't. Anna, is that feasible? Oh, there we go.
There we go. I think it might be feasible actually through Zoom platform itself. So I'm not going to commit 100%, but I feel that we may be able to, and we have ways to communicate with the attendees, so we can confirm that over the next couple of days.
Okay, wonderful. And this is a little more specific, I guess, on the stewardship side, on a specific property. Do you have a plan for Syndicate Island East related to the Cowan property donated by Norm? So that's part of the Cowan property. Is there anything specific that's planned for stewardship of that island?
Yeah, I'll maybe link that into another question that came in by the chat, and then turn it over to Warren if he wants to, or anybody else in the chat who wants to correct me from the stewardship committee. So there's also a question in the chat about what is a CEA, or what is a conservation easement agreement, and is it in perpetuity? So I'm going to answer that question first, and you'll understand why in a moment. So a conservation easement agreement is a tool enabled through the Conservation Lands Act. It's a provincial piece of legislation that lets us put a permanent agreement or permanent restriction on the title of a property. And so that's something that would be created in collaboration with a landowner who's wanting to protect their property, but doesn't want to give up ownership of it. They want to continue, still own it and still be able to give it to their children, or sell it to another donor. Another landowner, but they want to make sure that there are certain restrictions on what's allowed to happen there. So, pretty common ones are no subdivision. You can't create any more lots. No logging without a managed forest plan, no aggregate development. You really things to kind of protect the natural quality of that property, and often to protect the conservation work that landowner would have already done there. And so that's a conservation easement agreement. It's a really lengthy legal document. If anybody really wants to see one, there are some templates available on the OLTO website to look at. It's and they are registered on title of the property. They go to the next landowner, and they are in perpetuity. And it's up to the land trust or the other conservation body that holds the easement to enforce those covenants. So that brings me to the East Syndicate Island property, which was actually originally a conservation easement agreement donated by Norman Cowan in 2005, I think. And so that was a property, again, where he held ownership of it. He kept owning that property. And he worked with Kawartha Land Trust, which was then Kawartha Heritage Conservancy, to outline what the restrictions were that he wanted to see on that land when the next person took it over. As it turned out, when Norman died, he actually left us East Syndicate Island in his will, and there's some legal strangeness that happens when a conservation easement holder then becomes the owner of the property, and the easement is on hold, and then if it ever leaves the holder, then it becomes active again. It's anyway, I'm not a lawyer, and as you can tell by the hand waving, but suffice it to say that so when Norman originally donated that easement, he kind of had a notion of what was supposed to happen there, or more precisely, what wasn't supposed to happen there. And it wasn't supposed to be a property that we promoted for public access. It wasn't for camping. It wasn't for forestry. We didn't want to see buildings on it. And that's certainly kind of the plan that we have for it going forward. It's one of these properties where it's very much leave it alone and let nature take its course, and just try to mitigate any threats that are coming to it in terms of human use, or and we do inspections of it to see both for human use and to see if there's invasive species or something that have come on that need to be mitigated. Warren, I don't know if there's anything else from your knowledge on the stewardship committee, or any of our attendees who maybe wrote the stewardship plan who want to add anything to that.
Yeah, no, I can't add anything to that, John. I think that we have had discussions in general, general principles about whether there should be access to any and all properties. And I think the general agreement is that no, there are some properties that are, they're undisturbed and they should stay undisturbed. And if KLT can protect those, we wouldn't say no trespassing, but we wouldn't promote access to those properties. And I think the Syndicate Island probably falls in that category.
Yeah, certainly on many of our properties where there are trails, the intention is that people stay to the trails and you don't just traipse off and tromp all over. And it's meant to be guided, and that helps protect the land and protect the property. And Big Island was another example of that. It was a piece of land that was being abused 6 times the Sunday, and so at least now there's dedicated trails. It's been cleaned up, and there is certainly some monitoring to make sure that it remains protected and it's allowed to recover from the stresses that it was under. So okay, thanks everyone. There's another question here from Evan. Bill had mentioned that securement will be primarily by fee simple donation in the future. Will there be less emphasis on seeking conservation agreements now, or do they remain just as important?
I think there's a whole toolbox available for securement. Fee simple provides, the greatest, control or ability to manage and protect. But conservation easements are also a good mechanism, and I don't think there's any move to not establish conservation easements. It's just that there's a preference for fee simple whenever possible, because then Kawartha Land Trust has the greatest ability to ensure protection, and without any other kinds of legal encumbrances.
Yeah, perpetuity is what we're aiming for, and fee simple is certainly the best tool for that. Absolutely. Okay.
There's also some work going on at OLTA, the Ontario Land Trust Alliance level now, in terms of kind of reviewing conservation easement agreements and strengthening them, and especially looking at that enforcement side to say, when a conservation easement agreement is registered, it's down to the land trust to enforce those covenants. And what happens if that property is purchased by a large aggregate developer and they say, well, you know what, we're going to do it anyway, take us to court. What happens in that case when the land trust needs to defend against that sort of action? And so I think conservation easements agreements are a fantastic tool. I have a secret plan to register 100 easements in 100 days, but that's in the next strategic plan, so we won't talk about that right now. But there are some kind of not hurdles to jump through, but certainly kind of some things to get straight before we go into it to that degree.
Well, I'm only going to say that I think we've gone through all of the questions, at least that I've seen within the Q&A, and I would encourage anyone else that has a question, please put it in there. I thank you, Patricia, for scanning through the chats also to catch any questions that may have come through there as well.
No problem. I also wanted to add, I forgot, we also had the Compass Early Learning and Care Center. They had a Timbernook camp out at our Dance Nature Sanctuary over the summer. So they're a nature play-based camp. And so we had a bunch of little kids running around and enjoying and exploring dance. So that was another way we connected with youth this year.
And we're actually exploring a longer term agreement with them in terms of the potential of them taking over the house there as their offices and offering some enhanced outdoor learning opportunities, both through the Timbernook program and also for their other daycares and caregivers in the area. So we may have an explosion of small children exposed to conservation work at the dance property in the near future.
See, there we go. Learn something every time. Wow, right on. Okay. Well, without any more questions, it is 8:30. We said it would be 8. Well, it's 8:34. So we're just coming upon the end. So I just want to say what a wonderful event this was tonight. As I say, I hope everyone learned something and learned a little bit more about KLT and appreciates what KLT is certainly trying to do. And this reinvigorates, your belief in protecting the lands that we love and what the future may hold. tell your friends, tell your family, and we'll try and make this available. Thanks for all the hard work that the staff and chairs and volunteers and everyone else has put into making this happen tonight. It went it went very smoothly, I would say. You know, we're all learning the technology, and I would just say, you know, well done, great job. And with that, I'll sign off, and thanks to everyone.
Perfect. And thank you, John, for being our host and our MC. And I'd be remiss if I didn't thank Rachel and Patricia and Tasman, as they were the masterminds behind this whole thing, including the technology. So thank you to all of you for keeping the rest of us on track. It's been fantastic. And thank you to everybody for attending. We hope to see you out on a trail, and if not, at least by Zoom sometime soon.
Thanks, everyone.